Hi everybody, I am the Reading Tortie and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be doing the book review for The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Now, I'm sure what everybody's thinking, wow, Tortie, where have you been? We all read this like a decade ago. Well, I was busy not reading The Picture of Dorian Gray for no actually good reason. I want to say I was 10 feet under Call Me By Your Name, but the truth is that it's been on my reading list for quite some time, and what actually got me to pick this book up is a very unhealthy reason. It's not a big secret that I'm a very unhealthy person. It shouldn't be a secret at this point. So, I'm a big fan of K-pop, and I'm a big fan of the band called VIXX, VIXX. And there's a particular, little sub band. They have their own little unit called VIXX LR, and it's with the band members Leo and Ravi. And this is a completely useless story that you guys don't really need to know, but I'm going to share anyways. I'll put links in the bottom so you can fast forward through this. I was watching one of their music videos, and as the zealous fan that I am, I noticed that Leo was holding some books, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what books are these? Because they're in English and not in Korean. I can figure them out. And one of them was The Picture of Dorian Gray. And I took that as a sign from the gods telling me it's time to read The Picture of Dorian Gray. So I immediately went out to get the audiobook, not because I had actually purchased this about, 8 years ago. And so now we're here, and I came into this book actually surprisingly not knowing what to expect. I never really quite knew the premise. I knew that there was a guy named Dorian that had a cursed portrait, and that was about it. I thought it was going to be one of those classical romances where, the guy sells the soul of the devil for no good reason, but I was so surprised. I loved it. It took me by complete surprise. I didn't read spoilers. Weird. I usually read spoilers about stuff that I really want to read. So this was actually pretty out of character. But I listened to the book, the audio, the narrator was amazing, and I fell completely in love with this tragic story, and I am so glad that I read it now, when I did, versus 8 years ago, because I would have had a completely different experience, and I would have missed this beautiful feeling that I have right now towards this book. So I am so glad that I was a crazy fan and zoomed in, screenshot, and zoomed and high res the freaking screenshot so that I could read the text. And I picked up this book thanks to VIXX LR. I will leave a link to their stuff in the description box below because everybody should go check out VIXX LR. And if you don't like them, I'm sorry, but they're kind of my love of my life. So, The Picture of Dorian Gray. Back to what we're talking about. So, even though everybody probably knows what this is about, I'm going to give a brief summary because there might be somebody like me that actually does not know what this book is about. So this book is about a young man named Dorian, presumably the gentleman on the picture looking really snobby, and it's about a portrait that is painted of him by the artist Basil Hallward, and it's his curse of him making a wish that he doesn't age, but his picture does. And then that's where it all starts. That's where he starts losing his innocence and naivete. I don't know how to pronounce that word. I can never pronounce it. But his innocence, and his life starts spiraling out of control towards the tragic ultimate end that he faces. And personally, I blame Harry. I dislike Harry. I have such a deal with him. I have such a bone to pick with that guy. And the topic of discussion is actually going to be about Basil and Dorian and Harry. I hate Harry. I don't hate him. I'm just angry at him. Why did he have to talk to Dorian? So, I also went on a rant about this with my best friend. And she's like, oh, wow, I think I have to go back and reread that because I didn't catch any of that when I was reading it. And she looked at her, I'm like, you have to read between the lines. And she says, I think you do that a little more than you're supposed to, but that's beside the point. So the main characters are Dorian, Harry, and Basil. And there are secondary characters that I want to identify as Sybil Vane and the portrait itself, because the portrait is very much a character in itself, as well as almost like a setting and a state of mind. So Dorian is the young, naive, impressionable young man that becomes Lord Henry's plaything. Lord Henry, aka Harry, is he's an aristocrat, very blasé sort of character that doesn't really care about his negative influence, and he just loves spewing his paradoxical theories and stuff to anybody that will listen. And if someone happens to latch on, like Dorian did, he's like, oh, let's go for a ride on the decadence of life and how the only thing to live for is beauty. And once you lose beauty, life is absolutely meaningless. However, Harry doesn't quite explain that there are different types of beauty, that there are different definitions, and Dorian takes it very literal. And when he sees the portrait of himself, kind of falls in love with himself, and he decides that he never wants to age. Then there's Basil. Basil Hallward, I identify with him so much because I understand where he's coming from. Basil is an artist that has decided that Dorian is his muse, and that without Dorian, his life is mundane. His life is just like whitewashed, watered down. His existence is almost an afterthought, and his art doesn't have life. And he becomes completely obsessed with the idea of Dorian, and he doesn't want Dorian to change, and he doesn't want Lord Henry to meet Dorian because Lord Henry likes to screw with people and be like, hey, by the way, let's talk about debauchery and let's go do debauchery. But Harry actually doesn't do anything debaucherous. He just negatively influences people to go be decadent. And he's like, oh, hey, man, you actually did. How'd that go? And then he just goes back to being ironic. So it was Basil that brought them together because they were a mutual friend. And Dorian just happened to arrive early to his portrait. And Lord Henry sunk his wicked claws into a perfect little baby chick and totally screwed him, fed it to the wolves, and there went Basil with him. So Lord Henry isn't this vile, evil character I'm painting him out to be. I promise you he's not, but I have a very personal bone to pick with him. Lord Henry is an aristocrat that just loves being outlandish, loves causing scandal by stuff he says, loves scandalizing everybody, and like, oh, shocker, Lord Henry, what are you saying? And he's like, ha ha ha, too cool. But he doesn't go out and do any of that. He's very socially aware of what he can and cannot do, and unlike Dorian, that's like, hey, throw caution to the wind. Lord Henry is like, yeah, debauchery, but I'm actually not gonna pinky up. And he becomes, unfortunately, Dorian's best friend. And Dorian abandons Basil. And it was really hard for me. Then we got Sybil Vane, who is the very overtly tragic character here. Sybil Vane is Dorian's first victim. And I say with quotes because victim in the way that he treats people. He didn't go out and like personally end her, but the way he treated Sybil Vane, which is the way that Lord Henry treats like everybody and their mom, is what led her to her tragic end. And it's what really started the whole portrait thing. The portrait itself is also a character to me because of the fact that you keep referring to it at different points in Dorian's life where he feels extra guilty, where he goes to look at it and look at himself, and he sees the monster that he's becoming while keeping his beautiful, elegant youth in the eyes of polite society. So nobody really knows that he is an addict, that he is leading all of his younger friends to ruin, because like Harry ruined him, he's ruining everybody else in a much more overt way. So he becomes kind of like a black mark on everybody's social life. So if you associate with Dorian, you're pretty much like on the low rung of society and nobody wants to associate with you. Not anybody worthwhile anyways. So those are the characters. And there's a lot more that I want to say, but I'm going to save that for the topic of discussion, or else we're going to be here for like another hour. So, the setting. The setting of the book, I want to say, I actually wrote down, is kind of an afterthought. But it's not particularly an afterthought, it's just not the main focus. The main focus is Dorian's whirlwind of a life spiraling and careening out of control because of his decadence and his indulgence. So the setting is honestly very warped by what Harry sees, what Dorian sees, which is really good, but also really, I want to say the setting isn't exactly a reliable setting, if you will, because when Dorian is in love with Sybil Vane, the theater is this glamorous, avant-garde sort of indie place. But once he falls out of love, it's this dark, dingy, disgusting hole in the wall. And so that really is like a prime example of what the setting does. It shifts with the opinions of the narrator, of the character, and it's not really ever constant, it's more fluid. And you see the world revolving around Dorian and his debauchery. So that's the setting. Not much to really tell because the book is really heavily focused on the dialogue and the relationships that Dorian has and does not have and ruins in the end. So the plot, as I've stated, follows Dorian through his debaucherous life, and you get to watch it slowly careen out of control and go into a downward spiral to its ultimate crash at the very bottom of a canyon. And it's really good. I really enjoyed it, and it was done in a way that didn't quite lag. There was a section in the book that was listing off all of these extravagant things that Dorian was buying just because he could, but the story never really lost its focus on Dorian in relation to everybody else. So while everybody else is aging, and they have their lovely mundane lives that they have to deal with, and their little things of aging that they have to deal with, Dorian remains young. But even though he remains young, even though the world is essentially his oyster, he is so angry, so bitter. He is the unhappiest creature of everybody that he associates with, simply because he is just a narcissistic, spoiled, rotten punk. But I don't hate him for it. I mean, what would you do? Question of the video. What would you do if you could live your life however the heck you wanted and nothing would change? You would stay youthful, you would stay in your prime, and the picture would take all of your vices, would take all of the aging and the pain and the scarring and the diseases that you would acquire because of your frivolous lifestyle. What would you do? I mean, I can't be angry at the guy. I envy him because he has eternal youth to work with. He doesn't have to worry about his body deteriorating. But because of his lifestyle that he's chosen, which was influenced by Lord Henry, I still say Lord Henry is the root of the problem. If you disagree, please tell me, but I believe Lord Henry is the root of the problem. While his body doesn't deteriorate, his mental state is what goes. And he becomes more unstable, he becomes paranoid, confused, because of crap that he does. People are out to get him. So he's dealing with all these conflicts that, under normal circumstances, he wouldn't have had to deal with, because he wouldn't have had the jerk-off attitude that Lord Henry has. So the plot is really seeing Dorian break, not physically, but mentally. And although this is at its core a moral tale, I'm not exactly looking at it from a moral standpoint. I'm more looking at it just from the characters and their dynamics, not what Oscar Wilde wanted to say. there are plenty of people that have already covered that. So I just want to rant about the book and the characters. The conflicts are, step 1, Harry versus Basil. Poor Basil. Freaking Harry. I dislike Harry. He's just, damn it, Harry. Don't talk to Dorian. But he did, and now we're here. And the secondary conflict is really Dorian versus himself. We don't get really into too many nuances. It's pretty straightforward. But Dorian versus himself, it's Dorian dealing with his vices, dealing with his narcissism, with his desire to always be desired, his desire to be the most beautiful, eloquent, to kind of almost out-Harry Lord Harry, which is ridiculous. And that is eventually what undoes him, is his just growing instability and him losing himself in his, I guess, agelessness. He doesn't, I don't think he can handle the fact that he won't age. And while that's a good thing, I don't think he takes it very well. And if this had been anybody else that had this gift, he turns it into a curse, I think it would have been a much different story. So the resolution of the book is actually very poetic, in my opinion. Dorian, while I didn't hate him, I didn't quite like him. He upset me. He upset me because he betrayed Basil. Basil, like I said, is I feel like Basil, and I feel the pain that Basil felt, which I will talk about in the topic of discussion. But while I don't hate Dorian, I don't quite like him, and I dislike how much of Lord Henry he took upon himself. So, although I knew that he was going to have a tragic ending, I was hoping it wouldn't be so poetic. But I feel that his death was more poetic than he deserved. I wanted him to suffer some sort of indignity. I wanted him to hurt the way he hurt Basil and the way he hurt Sybil Vane, and I wanted some sort of ruin to befall him while he was conscious, like actual ruin. I didn't want him to just be like a black mark on people's social status. I wanted him to physically, I don't know, just repent maybe. I wanted some sort of justification that it's not okay that he did what he did and that he's living the way that he's living, but we don't get that. And that's so realistic. And the way it ended was just pure poetry because of the way that it ended. Not because of what he did, but because of where he was. And to me, for him to end where Basil ended, it was just beautiful to me. And I will talk about it more in the topic of discussion. But the resolution was bittersweet. It was satisfying. I enjoyed it. I was a little cathartic. Is that the right word? I don't know. I was in a freaking coma. And I felt so sad at the way it ended because I thought back to Basil. So while Dorian is the main character, in my mind, Basil is also always there. And Basil is there in my personal life. I think about Basil all the time because he's such an artist in love with his muse. So, really good book. It affected me in ways that I didn't expect it to. And I am so glad, as I stated at the beginning, that I read this at this part of my life. Because if I hadn't, I probably would have thought Harry was like so clever and so witty. Because I was young, impressionable, and naive, just like Dorian. But since I'm a cynical, bitter adult, I don't think he's funny. I think that he's a jerk-off that shouldn't be screwing with people's lives just because he can, and that he shouldn't be thought of as cool and witty just because he likes being ironic and contradictory and, paradoxes everywhere because debauchery, and it's not cool. And Lord Henry is not cool. He is just an a-hole that ruined Dorian, ruined Basil, and he gets to live pretty much happily ever after because even though he does divorce his wife, spoilers, he doesn't give a crap because he never loved her. So Lord Henry's life, it just continues herpa-derping all the way down till his, natural death of old age or whatever the hell he's going to die of. So, so review. I liked it. I really did. I loved it. And the topic of discussion will cover the original text a little bit and the relationship that I perceived between Basil, Dorian, and Harry. And Harry's still a jerk, even in the topic of discussion. So, let me know what you guys thought about this book when you read it. What was your first impression? If you've reread it, what has changed? And just what was your experience with this book? Because it was very unexpected to me. So, that's all I got for this video. Thank you guys for stopping by, and I will post the topic of discussion Thursday, I believe, because this should come up like Tuesday, Wednesday. So that would be it. And I don't have my little table next to me because I rearranged this room. So I have the books in my hand, whereas before I would just put them down. So be safe and have a good one, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!